Children of anti-vaxxers who grew up and got yourselves vaccinated, what's your story? How did your parents take it? Serious. Mum got rubella when pregnant with me. As a result I was born severely deaf, so there you go. Life's not the best. Y'all don't be freaking stupid. Interestingly, it seems as though you can lose your rubella immunity. I was immune during my first pregnancy, but then when tested for my second just 2 years later I was no longer immune and advised to avoid people. I had an idea they were anti-vaxxers, but it was never confirmed. They mentioned my younger brother wasn't, but it was justified because we were living in the mountains of Montana and it was too far a drive to the doctor. I assumed I had been, as I was born in civilization and we didn't move to the hills until I was 3. We were homeschooled. My older brother had trouble at college with his immunizations and mom said all the paperwork was lost when they moved. I was 30 years old and I was offered a job at a university helping train doctors. Started getting paperwork asking for proof of vaccinations. I just said test me and give me whatever I need. But I know I've had chickenpox. Turns out I had nothing. No antibodies, and I'd never had chickenpox either. Mum said I had. Lit up both arms with a run of shots over the next 3 months. All paid for by Vanderbilt. Thank you, Vandy. Never forget telling my boyfriend and he yelled, "You've been to Mexico. Twice and Europe. Oh my god." Called my mom and said, "Hey, I'm getting a job and they say I've never been vaccinated. Was I?" She got very defensive and said no. She hated making us cry as babies and they're bad for little kids. Also, did I really need them? She then tried to talk me out of them. Since I know how they work, I felt very okay letting her know I'd already starting the process, and thank God for herd immunity. I'm so thankful for all of you protecting me until I found out. She hated making you cry as babies. Dang lucky you didn't end up brain damaged from chemical meningitis or the like. What a freaking excuse. My mother stopped getting me immunized when I was 5. My dad wanted us immunized, but since mom was against it, my little brother and sister never got theirs. I got completely caught up once I turned 19. Dad got remarried a few years ago and he and his new wife are apparently anti-vaxxers now and believe that my baby sister's issue with one of her pinky fingers was caused from something his wife got while pregnant, and the entire thing is just completely wackadoodle. Vaccines don't mess up pinky fingers. I just don't get how that works. LOL. My mum didn't get the measles vaccination because at the time she thought it caused autism. She was kinda one of the first anti-vaxxers, wrote to papers about it, everything. Anyway, a girl in our social group caught meningitis and died. Basically freakishly uncommon. After that, mum was really scared the same thing could happen to me with any disease and basically begged me to get up to date with my shots. I guess the main takeaway is that when my mum was younger and inexperienced, she thought everything was a danger. She honestly thought she was doing best by me, I guess. Still has a bit of a problem trusting experts, though, if her reaction to the Charlie Gard case is anything to go by. I think it's important to recognize that parents aren't intentionally trying to hurt their kids. Well, most. I'm glad she decided to get you vaccinated after that though. It must have been terrifying. Hey, this is relevant to me. My parents chose not to vaccinate my sister and me. They have some unique ideas about science and medicine. We were also homeschooled, if that clarifies anything. We both wound up volunteering at hospitals at different points in our lives, so we had to get caught up anyway. For me it was at age 20, for an internship at a mental health facility. It was a little awkward explaining to the nurse why I had nothing on my record, but she was understanding overall. I did tell my parents, and I thought they would be really upset. They were for a little bit, but they also recognized that I'm an adult and it's my choice, even if they think it's a bad one. I think they were also more concerned about exposing me to anything when I was developing, versus now they figure my body can take whatever I put it through. My big concern now is what will happen when I get around to having children of my own in a few years. I think they'll see me as a bad mother if I get them vaccinated, so I'm anticipating some fireworks. The real war for me as a mother was getting my parents to vaccinate themselves. No baby time unless they got fluent DAP. They aren't even anti-vaxxers. My in-laws lean more crunchy anti-vaxxy, but they happily got the shots. My mom tried to lock horns with me while I was on bed rest and in very delicate condition. It took me telling her they wouldn't get to see baby for her to get the shots. I didn't receive any vaccinations through childhood due to my parents' beliefs. Once I got to college, I did my own research on them, learned the actual science behind them, and got all vaccinations in college. I then went to medical school, and yet they still don't believe me and my medical degree regarding vaccinations. Holidays can get awkward. You can't reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into, sadly. I was not vaccinated as a child because my mother thought vaccines were evil, unchristian, and other ridiculous things. This was in the early 80s before all the autism BS, but she had her own unique theories. I got myself vaccinated when I went to university. My mother was disappointed and wanted to write a letter to the school explaining her religious views on vaccines, as she had done for years to keep me exempt, but I decided to go with science. The most amusing part was going to doctors trying to get childhood vaccines as an adult. One doctor didn't even believe me. He actually laughed. "What do you mean you need an MMR?" The doctor who eventually got me sorted had to look up a schedule and sort of wing it because it is something she had never dealt with before. We had a good laugh. Though DTaP is no joke, that crap freaking hurts. My mother was not happy but sort of conceded that getting vaccinated as an adult was less risky than as a baby or whatever. It was required for university. Thank God for that. Parents didn't really care. Hey, one I can answer. My dad was the anti-vaxxer. My mom was mostly ambivalent. Neither my brother or I were vaccinated at birth, and I didn't get my shots until I turned 19. My brother had to get a tetanus shot once when he was 6. Due to an injury, it burned my dad up for a while. His reasoning was typical. He believed that the mercury in the vaccines would cause us to somehow develop autism. My parents were also pretty hippy-dippy compared to most baby boomers, so they were concerned about chemicals and all that as well. Jokes on them, though, because both my brother and I are Aspies regardless of being unvaccinated. It was always a pain in the ass whenever we had to do school-related paperwork or field trip stuff, because my parents would have to produce a letter stating that it was their religious right to keep us untainted by vaccination. We were never a religious family. I wasn't a super sickly child, with a few exceptions, but my younger brother suffered a lot. He got pneumonia when he was real little, like 3-4. They had to keep him in the hospital and I remember my dad taking care of me at home while my mom stayed in the room with my brother. About a year or two after that he got walking pneumonia, and again was hospitalized. He's also allergic to dang near everything, and has bad asthma now. He has epilepsy, and we both have chronic migraines. I never had anything seriously life-threatening in terms of illness, but there was a nearly year-long period where I had strep throat almost every other week. I should have had my tonsils out. They wanted to intubate me at one point but for whatever reason changed their minds. But my dad threw a fit about having any surgeries performed. I also developed shingles when I was 13, which my father initially treated as poison ivy and left mostly untreated until my mother intervened. I still have little to no feeling on swatches of the left side of my body from the blister scars. That sucked. I did, however, have to get my vaccinations when I turned 18 and enrolled in college. He was not pleased about that, and actually we didn't talk for almost a year because of my decision to get vaccinated. Eventually we worked things out, but it took a while. I'll be vaccinating any children I may have in the future, though. When I was 19 I had to get some vaccines in order to start college and my mom was not helpful. First she tried to get me exempt from the vaccines and when that didn't work she sent me into the clinic, alone, with completely false outdated info. I was super embarrassed when the nurses looked at my notes and told me that none of it was correct, but luckily they helped me figure out what I needed and didn't shame me too much for not having a previous vaccination record. A couple years later I went back in to get the rest of the recommended vaccines. My sister had her first kid, and the first grandbaby, last year and our mom has been pushing her not to vaccinate. Fortunately, my sister has chosen to vaccinate. She still is trying to get us to watch a documentary about it to change our minds. Now all us kids just don't talk to our mom about vaccines because it always turns into an argument. As soon as I turned 18 I got all of my vaccines up to date. My mother stopped after I was 7 or so. My dad didn't agree with her but respected her wishes. After I got them updated through my dad's health insurance, she was annoyed about it, but I eventually managed to explain herd immunity to her, and also found enough sources calling that out, the study that claimed vaccines cause autism, that she finally admitted she was incorrect, but still won't admit that vaccines aren't bad for you, saying that they have too much mercury in them. It's hard for people to admit they are wrong, so the fact that she did even a little is great. My parents were very against it, never particularly vocal about it, but growing up, my schools would organize mass vaccinations for all the kids, MMR etc, and I was always mysteriously off sick those days. My school never noticed and I was always pretty happy, as I have a terrible phobia of needles and never really understood the health implications. I've never had any health problems, but I've had partners weirded out by it. I was dating one guy who didn't want to go near me once he found out I hadn't had any vaccinations. That felt odd. Last year there was a measles outbreak at my university and I was very nervous about it. Called my parents for advice and their response? Go get the vaccine. Classic. I'm guessing their opinions have changed over the years, but they're too proud to say outright that maybe they were wrong and their children's health could now be at risk. About time I got the rest of them done. Well, that was quite the turnaround on their part. My parents used to not vaccinate me or any of my 4 siblings, but when I was like 3 years old, me and my siblings all came down with whooping cough. It scarred my lungs and I have yellow stains on my teeth because the high fevers cook my adult teeth inside my head. My parents vaccinated us after that. Jesus Christ, 5 kids with whooping cough. That must have been a nightmare for your parents. My mom is against vaccines and I grew up in a very against vaccine school and was treated by homeopathic and holistic doctors. I used to believe all that crap. Then I started med school and changed my mind to vaccines aren't bad but they aren't necessary. Then I did a rotating at a pediatric hospital in the neurological area. That was a huge eye-opener. Meningitis is an awful disease and anti-vax never talk about it. The children I saw were the ones that survived and had brain damage afterwards. It was awful to see kids that could have had a perfectly normal life to end up like that. A coworker's brother-in-law ended up brain dead from meningitis. He and his flatmates thought he had the flu in the morning. In the afternoon they found him unconscious. His life support was switched off after 2 weeks. I'm in my early-ish 20s and I have never had vaccines. However, I am very much for them. I'm actually embarrassed that I don't have them. My parents didn't vaccinate me as a child for a legitimate medical reason, so they say, but my brother was not vaccinated either. I am pretty sure I can get them now, regardless of if the medical situation is the truth or not. I'm on the search for a general doctor in my new state right now to ask questions and get vaccinated. I'm curious if there were any risks involved in getting vaccinated as an adult. The only thing to make sure of is that the reason you weren't vaccinated was because of an allergy. My husband's parents are pro-science, pro-vaccine, but because of his congenital condition and a very specific allergy, there was one vaccine he wasn't able to get, which is why herd immunity is so important. When the HPV vaccine came out, there was a bunch of stories on the news about girls having poor reactions to it, getting seizures, comas. Most of it nonsense, but my mother saw the news stories and chose not to get me vaccinated. But then, right after college, I had a brief bout of thyroid cancer and decided I would take every precaution I could to not get more cancer. So I got the shots. I think at the time I didn't tell my mom, but afterward it came up. She was more huffy than anything else and defended her thoughts at the time, but accepted my decision and reasoning. Also, there was the argument that it would make girls more promiscuous and it would encourage consequence-free yes. Utter nonsense. You have been visited by the brewer puppy. Comment drink well puppy to get infinite beer. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.